My name is Marlow Trasker, and I'm about to tell you how I became the villain in my own life story. Not the misunderstood anti-hero, not the guy who made tough choices for good reasons. The straight-up, no excuses needed villain. And you know what? I'm perfectly fine with that. It started at Ashwood Hall on what should have been the happiest night of our 20-year marriage renewal. Vanna had insisted on the whole spectacle. White dress, flowers, the works. Said we needed to recommit publicly after some rough patches. I should have known right then that something was rotten in Denmark, as my old boxing coach Marty would say. The hall looked like something out of a fairy tale, all twinkle lights and expensive linens. Cost me 3 months of garage profits. But Vanna had that way of making you feel cheap if you questioned her vision. She stood there in her designer gown, looking like $1,000,000, and I felt proud, despite everything. Stupid, but proud. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vanna announced, tapping her champagne glass with that silver knife her mother had given us. The crowd of about 80 people, family, friends, half the town of Ashwood, turned to listen. Before we continue with our celebration, I have something important to share. I figured she was going to give some speech about love conquering all, maybe mention how we'd weathered the storm of my brother Rhett's business failures and his constant need for bailouts. Instead, she looked right past me to where Rhett stood near the bar, looking uncomfortable in his rented tux. "This dance," she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room, "is for the man I've secretly loved for 10 years. The words hit me like a left hook I never saw coming. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Someone's fork clattered against their plate. My daughter Darla, home from college for the occasion, went pale as fresh snow. Vanna walked right past me, her husband of 20 years, the guy who just renewed his vows with her, and extended her hand to my younger brother. Rhett looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole, but he took her hand anyway. They moved to the center of the dance floor while I stood there like a statue, watching my marriage implode in front of everyone I'd ever known. The crowd didn't know whether to applaud or run for the exits. A few people started clapping awkwardly, probably thinking this was some kind of joke. Others whispered behind their hands, already composing the gossip they'd spread tomorrow. I should have been furious, should have made a scene, thrown punches, done something dramatic. Instead, I felt this weird calm settle over me, like the moment before a big fight when everything goes quiet and clear. I walked over to Vanna's father, who was standing with his mouth hanging open like a fish. "Did you tell her about the Ashwood Trust?" I asked him quietly. The old man went white as his shirt collar. "Marlow, that's what I thought. See, here's something most people don't know about small towns like Ashwood. Everybody's got secrets, and if you pay attention long enough, you start collecting them like baseball cards." Vanna's father had been skimming from his construction company's pension fund for years. Nothing huge, just enough to maintain his lifestyle after the recession hit. I'd figured it out when I did some work on his books as a favor. I pulled out my phone and opened an app I'd installed months ago. Call it insurance. With a few taps, I triggered something I'd set up after I first started suspecting Vanna was up to something. Every bridesmaid in the wedding party simultaneously received text messages showing bank statements from our joint account. Statements showing that Vanna had been systematically draining our savings for the past 6 months. The messages also went to her parents, my parents, and about 20 other key people in the room. Within 30 seconds, phones were buzzing all over Ashwood Hall. But I wasn't done. I walked over to Jerry Michaels, the venue manager, and had a quiet word with him. Jerry owed me a favor. I'd rebuilt his Camaro engine for free after his wife left him. He nodded and casually moved to the main entrance, engaging the electronic locks we'd installed for security. Nobody was leaving until I said so. Vanna was still dancing with Rhett, probably thinking she was having some romantic movie moment. The music was still playing, but conversations had started up again. Urgent, whispered conversations as people checked their phones and shared what they'd just learned. I grabbed the microphone from the DJ booth. "Folks, Thanks for coming out tonight, I said, my voice echoing through the sound system. I know this has been an interesting evening so far, but I've got a few more surprises. Vanna finally stopped dancing, looking at me with something between panic and defiance. Rhett just looked sick. See, I've been doing some detective work lately, I continued. Amazing what you can learn when you start paying attention. For instance, did you know that my loving wife here has been planning this little announcement for months? Oh yes, this wasn't some spontaneous declaration of love. This was choreographed. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I pulled out a tablet and connected it to the hall's projection system. Suddenly, a series of text messages appeared on the wall behind me. Messages between Vanna and someone named Cleo, discussing exactly how to handle tonight's reveal. And here's my personal favorite, I said, scrolling to a particularly damning exchange. Vanna writing, and I quote, "Marlow will be so humiliated he'll probably just slink away. Then we can get the house and the business without a messy divorce." The room went completely silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Vanna was staring at the projection like she'd seen a ghost. Rhett had gone from sick to terrified. "Now, I know what you're all thinking," I said, warming up to my audience. "Poor Marlow, getting blindsided like this. But here's the thing. I've known about their little affair for 3 months. I just wanted to see how far they'd take it." I clicked to the next screen, showing photos of Vanna and Rhett together at various locations around town. Nothing inappropriate, but clearly intimate. Meeting at coffee shops, sitting close in his car, holding hands in the park. "The question is," I said, looking directly at my wife, "what do we do now?" The aftermath of that night spread through Ashwood like spilled oil on a garage floor, fast, messy, and impossible to clean up. By morning, everyone in town knew the story, and by afternoon, everyone had picked sides. Guess which side most people chose? Hint, it wasn't mine. See, that's the thing about small towns. People love drama, but they hate the person who creates it, even if they're the victim. Vanna and Rhett became the star-crossed lovers, kept apart by cruel circumstances and a vindictive husband. I became the bitter, controlling man who'd humiliated his wife in public. I was sitting in my garage 3 days later, trying to focus on rebuilding a 1967 Mustang engine, when Marty showed up. Marty owned the Ashwood Boxing and Social Club, a rundown gym where I'd spent most of my teenage years learning to fight. He was pushing 70 now, but still looked like he could go 10 rounds with guys half his age. "Heard you put on quite a show the other night," he said, settling onto a milk crate I kept for visitors. "News travels fast," I replied, not looking up from the engine block. "Faster when it's that kind of news. Half the town's calling you a monster, the other half's calling you an idiot." "What are you calling me?" Marty was quiet for a long moment. "I'm calling you a man who got played, but who's smart enough to play back. Question is, what's your next move?" That was the thing about Marty. He didn't waste time on sympathy or moral lectures. He understood that sometimes life hits you hard, and your only choice is to hit back harder. "I'm thinking about it," I said. "Well, while you're thinking, your brother's been making the rounds, telling everyone how sorry he is, how it just happened, how he never meant to hurt you." I looked up from the engine. "And? And your wife's been playing the victim, says you've been emotionally distant for years, that she felt neglected, that she found comfort with Rhett because he understood her. Of course she did. Your daughter's been posting on that TikTok thing. Seen it?" I hadn't, but I could imagine. Darla had always been closer to Vanna, always thought I was too rough around the edges, too blue-collar for her refined sensibilities. She probably saw this as proof that her mother deserved better. "What's she saying? That you embarrassed the family? That Uncle Rhett's always been more of a father figure to her, that she's ashamed to have your name?" That one hit deeper than I expected. I'd worked 60-hour weeks for years to pay for Darla's private school, her college tuition, her spring break trips to Cancun. I'd missed boxing matches, skipped fishing trips, turned down jobs that would have taken me away from home, all so I could be present for her. And this was how she repaid me. "There's more," Marty said. "Rhett's been staying at the house. Vanna told people you moved out voluntarily, that you're being reasonable about the whole thing. The house is in my name. Possession is 9/10 of the law, especially when public opinion's against you." I set down my wrench and really looked at Marty for the first time since he'd arrived. His expression was carefully neutral, but I could see something calculating in his eyes. "You've got advice," I said. "I've got perspective. You know how many guys I've trained over the years? Hundreds. And you know what separates the winners from the losers? Tell me. Winners don't get mad. They get even. And they don't get caught." That evening, I drove by the house, my house, and saw Rhett's truck in the driveway. The lights were on in the kitchen, and through the window I could see the three of them having dinner like a happy family. Vanna, Rhett, and Darla, laughing about something. My chair at the head of the table was empty, like I'd never existed. I parked across the street and watched for a while, trying to figure out what I was feeling. It wasn't anger, exactly. It was something colder, more focused. Like the moment in a fight when you stop reacting to your opponent's punches and start planning your own. My phone buzzed. A text from Darla. "Dad, we need to talk. Can you meet me at Rosie's Diner tomorrow at 7? I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to believe she was reaching out, that maybe she wanted to hear my side of the story. But I'd learned not to trust my optimistic instincts where my family was concerned. I texted back, "I'll be there." The next evening I showed up at Rosie's 5 minutes early and grabbed a corner booth. The place was nearly empty, just a few regulars nursing coffee and pie. Darla arrived exactly on time, looking uncomfortable in her designer jeans and college sweatshirt. "Hi, Dad," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Darla." We ordered coffee and sat in awkward silence for a few minutes. Finally, she cleared her throat. "I wanted to talk to you about what happened at the wedding," she said. "I figured. The way you handled it? It was really hurtful, Dad. Not just to Mom, but to everyone there." I sipped my coffee and waited for her to continue. "I mean, I get that you were upset, but did you have to humiliate her like that, in front of everyone?" "Your mother humiliated herself," I said quietly. "I just made sure everyone could see it clearly. That's not fair. Mom made a mistake, but she's trying to do the right thing now." "The right thing?" "She and Uncle Rhett really love each other, Dad. This isn't some fling or midlife crisis. They've been fighting their feelings for years, trying to be loyal to you." I almost laughed. "Is that what they told you?" "It's the truth. And honestly, Dad, when's the last time you and Mom were really happy together? When's the last time you did anything romantic, or even just paid attention to her?" There it was, the narrative they'd constructed, with me as the neglectful husband who'd driven his wife into another man's arms. It was neat, tidy, and completely ridiculous. "So this is my fault?" I asked. "I'm not saying it's your fault, but maybe it's nobody's fault. Maybe sometimes people just grow apart, and sometimes they find their real soulmate later in life. Your mother's real soulmate is my brother." "Why is that so hard to believe?" "Uncle Rhett gets her in ways you never did. He appreciates her intelligence, her ambitions. He doesn't make her feel bad for wanting more than just this small town." I studied my daughter's face, looking for some trace of the little girl who used to help me work on cars, who used to think I hung the moon. She was gone, replaced by this young woman who saw me as an obstacle to her mother's happiness. "What do you want from me, Darla?" "I want you to let them be happy. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Mom says you're being difficult about the divorce, that you're trying to keep the house and the business out of spite." "The house and business are mine. I built them. You built them together, as a family. And now the family's changing, and you need to accept that. I finished my coffee and left a $10 bill on the table. Thanks for the talk, Darla. It's been enlightening. Dad, wait! But I was already walking away. Outside in the parking lot, I sat in my truck for a few minutes, letting the anger build. Not the hot, explosive kind that makes you do stupid things, but the cold, patient kind that makes you dangerous. They wanted to rewrite history, to make me the villain in their love story. Fine, I'd be the villain. But I'd be the kind of villain who wins. The thing about being betrayed by everyone you love is that it clarifies your priorities real fast. I spent the next week doing something I should have done years ago, paying attention to the details of my own life. First stop, the bank. I'd been letting Vanna handle our finances for years, trusting her MBA and her fancy job at Ashwood First National to keep us on solid ground. Turns out that was mistake number 1 of about 1,000. Mr. Trasker, said Janet Mills, the branch manager who'd known me since high school. I have to say, I was surprised by some of the recent activity on your accounts. She pulled out a stack of statements that made my head spin. Over the past year, Vanna had opened 3 credit cards in my name, taken out a home equity loan, and systematically moved money from our joint accounts into ones I'd never heard of. This account here, Janet pointed to a statement, was opened 6 months ago. It's in your name, but the activity suggests someone else has been using it. The someone else was obviously Vanna. The account showed regular deposits from her salary, but also large cash withdrawals and payments to places like high-end clothing stores, expensive restaurants, and something called Rivington Consulting. What's Rivington Consulting? I asked. Janet typed something into her computer. It's registered as a business advisory service. Owner is listed as Cleo Rivington. The name rang a bell. Cleo was Vanna's work friend, the one she was always having drinks with after hours, the one who'd supposedly been giving her advice about our marriage problems. Can you freeze all these accounts? I asked. The joint accounts, yes. The ones in your name only, absolutely. But Mr. Trasker, if you're going through a divorce... I'm not going through anything yet. I'm just protecting my assets. Next stop, my lawyer, Pete Kowalski. Pete and I had gone to high school together, and he'd handled the paperwork when I bought the garage. He was one of those guys who looked like an accountant, but thought like a street fighter. Marlow, he said, reviewing the bank statements I'd brought him. You're in a world of trouble here. How bad? Well, the good news is that most of this activity happened without your knowledge, so we can probably get it reversed. The bad news is that your wife has been very thorough in setting up her exit strategy. He showed me documents I'd never seen before, papers with my forged signature, loan applications, even a power of attorney that would have given Vanna complete control over the garage. She's been planning this for at least a year, Pete said, maybe longer. What about the house? The house is tricky. It's in your name, but she's established residency and can claim abandonment if you don't move back in. I'm not living with her and my brother. Then you need to make them leave. Legally. Pete explained the process. Formal eviction notices, court hearings, the whole bureaucratic nightmare. It would take months and cost thousands in legal fees. There might be another way, he said carefully. I'm listening. If you could prove that they're cohabiting in a way that violates the terms of your marriage, or if you could show that she's been fraudulent in her financial dealings. You mean if I could catch them in the act? I mean, if evidence came to light that supported your position. I left Pete's office with a clear understanding of the situation. Vanna and Rhett had been planning this for months, maybe years. They'd been careful, methodical, and smart about it. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated me. That evening, I drove to the Ashwood Boxing and Social Club. The gym was nearly empty, just a few guys working the heavy bags and Marty reading a newspaper in his office. The place smelled like sweat and leather and determination, smells that reminded me of who I used to be before I got soft. You look like a man with a plan, Marty said when I walked into his office. I'm working on it. Good. Because your brother was here yesterday, asking about you. That surprised me. Rhett had never shown any interest in boxing, had always thought it was beneath him. What did he want? Said he was worried about you, wanted to know if you'd been talking about doing anything stupid. What did you tell him? Told him you were too smart to do anything stupid, but I didn't say anything about doing something clever. Marty pulled out a bottle of whiskey and poured 2 glasses. You want to know what I think? Always. I think your brother and your wife are scared. They thought you'd roll over, maybe make some noise, but ultimately accept the situation. Instead, you've got them worried about what you might do next. Maybe they should be worried. Maybe they should. But Marlow, whatever you're planning, you need to be smarter than they are. They've got public sympathy right now, but that can change fast if you play your cards right. I spent the rest of the evening at the gym, working the heavy bag until my knuckles were raw. Each punch was a problem I needed to solve, each combination a step in a plan that was slowly taking shape. When I got back to the motel where I'd been staying, I found Darla sitting on the hood of my truck. She looked like she'd been crying. Dad, we need to talk, she said. We talked yesterday. No, we talked yesterday about what Mom and Uncle Rhett wanted me to say. Tonight I want to talk about what I want to say. I unlocked my motel room door and gestured for her to come inside. The place was depressing. Thin carpets, flickering fluorescent lights, the smell of industrial disinfectant. But it was mine, and nobody could take it away from me. I've been thinking about what you said, Darla began. About Mom humiliating herself, and I've been paying attention to things I didn't notice before. Such as the way she talks about you when you're not around. The way she and Uncle Rhett look at each other when they think nobody's watching. The way they've been redecorating the house, getting rid of your stuff. She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo. It was my home office, the room where I kept my boxing trophies, my car magazines, my collection of vintage tools. Everything was gone, replaced by generic furniture and abstract art. They told me you said they could redecorate, she said. I never said that. I know. I called the storage unit where they put your stuff. You never authorized that either. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe my daughter wasn't completely lost to me after all. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I realized something. Mom's not the victim here. You are. And I've been helping them hurt you because I believed their story. She started crying again, and for a moment she looked like the little girl I remembered. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. I wanted to hug her, to tell her it was okay, that we could fix this. But I'd learned not to trust my optimistic instincts. What do you want from me, Darla? I want to help. Whatever you're planning, I want to help. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception, for evidence that this was another setup, but all I saw was a young woman who'd finally realized she'd been played. Helping me might mean going against your mother, I said. I know. It might mean doing things that aren't very nice. I know that too. And it definitely means keeping secrets. I'm good at keeping secrets, Dad. I've been keeping Mom's secrets for months. That got my attention. What secrets? Darla took a deep breath. The affair with Uncle Rhett isn't the only thing she's been hiding. What my daughter told me that night changed everything I thought I knew about my wife, my brother, and my own life. Turns out Vanna hadn't just been unfaithful. She'd been running a long-term con that made her wedding night confession look like amateur hour. It started about 2 years ago, Darla explained, curled up in the motel room's single chair while I sat on the bed. Mom would get these phone calls late at night, always from the same person. She'd take them in her office with the door closed, but I could hear her through the walls. What kind of calls? Business stuff, but not bank business. She'd talk about the plan and the timeline and managing the target. I thought maybe she was planning a surprise party for you or something. The target. That would be me. Then she started having these meetings with Cleo Rivington. You know, her friend from work? I knew Cleo by reputation. Mid-40s, never married, one of those sharp-dressed women who seem to have an opinion about everything. Vanna was always quoting her advice about marriage, money, and life in general. They'd meet at the house when you were at the garage, Darla continued. Always in Mom's office, always with the door locked. But one day I came home early from school and heard them talking in the kitchen. About what? About you. About how to handle the transition and minimize resistance. Cleo kept saying that men like you were predictable, that you'd probably just disappear rather than fight for anything. Men like me. I filed that phrase away for later consideration. There's more, Dad. Mom's been recording conversations with you. She's got hours of audio on her phone, all edited to make you sound angry or unreasonable. That explained a few things. Over the past year, Vanna had been picking fights about random topics, always when we were alone, always when I was tired or stressed from work. I'd assumed it was just marriage stuff, the normal friction that builds up over 20 years. Instead, she'd been building a case against me. What about your Uncle Rhett? When did he get involved? Darla looked uncomfortable. I think he was involved from the beginning. Those late-night calls, some of them were to him and Dad. I think they've been together longer than they said. How much longer? Remember when Uncle Rhett's business failed and he was staying with us for a few months? This was like 3 years ago? I remembered. Rhett had been going through a rough patch after his restaurant went under, and Vanna had insisted we let him use the guest room until he got back on his feet. I'd thought it was generous of her, maybe even a sign that our marriage was stronger than I'd realized. They were sleeping together then, Darla said quietly. I saw them once early in the morning when I got up for school. Mom was coming out of the guest room in her robe. 3 years. They'd been planning this for 3 years, living in my house, eating my food, taking my money and laughing at me behind my back. The wedding night confession wasn't the beginning of their affair, it was the end of their charade. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because I finally figured out what they're really after. It's not just about being together, Dad. It's about the money. She pulled out her phone and showed me a series of screenshots, text messages between Vanna and Cleo discussing property values, business assessments, and something called the Ashwood opportunity. What's the Ashwood opportunity? The land where your garage sits. Apparently, the city's been quietly planning a development project, luxury condos, shopping centers, that whole thing. The land is worth about 10 times what you paid for it. I stared at the phone screen, trying to process what I was seeing. My garage sat on 3 acres of prime real estate, right in the heart of Ashwood's planned revitalization zone. I'd bought it 15 years ago for practically nothing because it was in a rundown industrial area nobody wanted. If the city was really planning major development, how do they know about this? Mom works at the bank that's financing the project. She's seen all the plans, knows exactly which properties they want to buy. And Cleo's consulting company? She's been hired by the developers to help with community outreach and property acquisition. The pieces were falling into place. Vanna hadn't just been planning to leave me. She'd been planning to destroy me financially, take everything I'd built, and cash in on inside information about the development project. There's something else, Darla said. They've been telling people around town that you're unstable, that you've been drinking too much, that you might do something violent. Why would they do that? So that when they take everything from you, people will think it's for your own good. And if you fight back, they can say they were right about you being dangerous. I sat in silence for a long time, absorbing the full scope of what had been done to me. It wasn't just adultery or even fraud. It was a systematic campaign to isolate me, discredit me, and steal everything I'd worked for. Dad? Darla's voice was small, uncertain. What are you going to do? I looked at my daughter, really looked at her for the first time in months. She was 20 years old, smart as hell, and apparently a lot tougher than I'd given her credit for. She'd figured out her mother's game and chosen to warn me instead of going along with it. "I'm going to beat them at their own game," I said. "How?" "By being smarter, more patient, and more ruthless than they are." The next morning, I called in sick to the garage and drove to the county courthouse. Public records are a beautiful thing when you know how to read them, and I'd learned a lot about property law during my years as a business owner. The development project was real, bigger than I'd imagined. The city had already approved preliminary plans for a mixed-use complex that would transform downtown Ashwood from a Rust Belt casualty into a trendy destination. My garage was right in the center of the proposed development zone. But here's what Vanna and her conspirators didn't know. I'd been paying attention to city council meetings for years, and I knew that the project was still in the early stages. The developers needed to acquire several key properties before they could move forward, and they were being very quiet about it to keep land prices down. I spent the rest of the day making phone calls and visiting old friends. By evening, I had a clear picture of the situation and a plan that would have made Machiavelli proud. That night, I met Darla at a diner on the outskirts of town, far from anywhere we might be seen by Vanna's network of allies and informants. "I need you to do something for me," I said. "Something that might be difficult." "What is it?" "I need you to go back to playing along with your mother's plan. Act like our conversation last night never happened. Be the dutiful daughter who supports her mother's new relationship." Darla looked hurt. "You don't trust me?" "I trust you completely, but I need you on the inside, gathering information, keeping track of what they're planning. Can you do that?" She thought about it for a moment, then nodded. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to give them exactly what they think they want, and when they reach for it, I'm going to snap the trap shut." Over the next 2 weeks, I played the part of the defeated husband. I signed papers Pete told me not to sign, agreed to financial arrangements that seemed heavily weighted in Vanna's favor, and generally acted like a man who'd given up fighting. Meanwhile, Darla fed me intelligence from inside the house. Vanna and Rhett were getting bolder, more confident that their plan was working. They'd already contacted a real estate agent about selling the garage property. Cleo was pushing them to move faster, worried that I might figure out the development angle. They were right to be worried. On a Thursday evening, I got the call I'd been waiting for. Pete's voice was excited, almost giddy. "Marlow, you beautiful genius, it worked." "All of it?" "Every single piece. They walked right into it." I smiled for the first time in weeks. "Then it's time for the endgame." The beauty of a well-executed plan is that your enemies destroy themselves while thinking they're winning. By the time they realize what's happening, it's too late to change course. They're committed, exposed, and completely at your mercy. I'd spent 3 weeks setting up the pieces, and now it was time to watch them fall. It started with a phone call to Vanna on Friday morning. I used my most defeated voice, the tone of a man who'd finally accepted his fate. "Vanna, it's me. I've been thinking about what you said, about not making this harder than it has to be." "Oh." She sounded surprised, maybe even suspicious. "What about it?" "I want to meet with you and Rhett, all of us together, so we can work out the final details without lawyers getting in the way." "I don't know, Marlow. Things have been said, feelings have been hurt." "I'm not going to cause trouble. I just want to understand what you need from me so we can all move on." There was a long pause. I could practically hear her calculating, weighing the risks against the potential benefits. "Where did you have in mind?" "Somewhere private. Maybe the old warehouse by the river? The one where we used to have the company picnics?" Another pause. "Why there?" "Because it's neutral territory. Not your space, not mine. Just a place where we can talk honestly. I'll have to discuss it with Rhett." "Of course. But Vanna, I'd like Cleo to be there too." That got her attention. "Cleo? Why?" Because she's been advising you through this whole process. If we're going to reach an agreement, I want everyone who's been involved to be part of the conversation. I'll call you back. She hung up, and I knew she'd take the bait. The warehouse meeting was too good an opportunity for them to pass up. A chance to corner me in private, away from witnesses, and pressure me into signing away everything I'd built. What they didn't know was that I'd spent the past week preparing that warehouse very carefully. Saturday evening, I arrived at the warehouse an hour early. The building had been abandoned for years, but the basic infrastructure was still intact. Electricity, running water, even an old sound system left over from the company events we used to hold there. I'd made some modifications over the past few days, hidden cameras in key locations, all connected to a live stream that would broadcast to a private social media group I'd created. The group had exactly 100 members, every important person in Ashwood, from the mayor to the bank president to the local newspaper editor. At 7 o'clock, Vanna's car pulled into the parking lot. She got out first, looking nervous in her designer jeans and silk blouse. Red emerged from the passenger side, trying to project confidence, but failing badly. And from the back seat came Cleo Rivington, dressed like she was heading to a board meeting instead of a warehouse confrontation. "Hello, Marlow," Vanna said as they approached the entrance where I was waiting. "Vanna, Rhett, Cleo." I nodded to each of them in turn. "Thanks for coming." Inside, I'd set up 4 chairs in a circle under the brightest lights in the building. It looked almost civilized, like a therapy session or a business meeting. "This is very dramatic," Cleo said, looking around with obvious distaste. "Couldn't we have done this at a restaurant?" "I wanted privacy," I replied. "Please, sit down. Can I get anyone coffee? I brought a thermos." They exchanged glances but took their seats. I poured coffee for everyone, playing the gracious host. The cameras were rolling, the stream was live, and my audience was watching. "So," I said, settling into my own chair, "let's talk about what you want." "What we want," Vanna said carefully, "is an amicable resolution to our situation." "By situation, you mean your 3-year affair with my brother?" Rhett flinched. "Marlow, it's not 3 years, Rhett. Not the 10 years Vanna claimed at the wedding, but 3 years. Since the first time you stayed in our guest room after your restaurant failed." "How did you—" Vanna started, then stopped herself. "How did I find out? I'm not as stupid as you thought I was. None of you are as smart as you thought you were." I stood up and walked over to a table where I'd laid out several manila folders. "Would you like to see what I've learned?" Cleo spoke for the first time. "Marlow, I think we should focus on moving forward, not relitigating the past." "Oh, but the past is so interesting, Cleo, especially your part in it." I opened the first folder and pulled out a stack of documents. "Rivington Consulting, your business that doesn't seem to have any actual clients except for the Ashwood Development Group." Her face went pale. "See, I did some digging into this development project you've all been so excited about. Turns out it's not as solid as you thought. The financing fell through last week. The whole thing's been canceled." That wasn't entirely true, but it was close enough. The project had hit some major snags, and there was a good chance it would never happen. "But here's the really interesting part," I continued. "You've been taking money from my wife for months, supposedly to provide consulting services, but what you've really been doing is running a con game." I pulled out more documents, bank records, email printouts, phone logs that Darla had helped me obtain. "You convinced Vanna that she could get rich by stealing my property and selling it to the developers. You told her exactly how to manipulate me, how to document our conversations to make me look unstable, how to set up the affair with Rhett to justify taking everything." "That's not true," Vanna said, but her voice lacked conviction. "It's all true. Every word. And the best part is, you've been paying her to destroy your own marriage. Cleo's been billing you for the advice on how to betray me." I turned to Rhett, who looked like he was going to be sick. "And you, little brother, did you really think Vanna loved you? Or did you know from the beginning that this was about money? It's not like that. It's exactly like that. Cleo recruited you because she needed someone close to me, someone who could get inside information about my business and my finances. The affair was just a bonus. I walked back to my chair and sat down, enjoying the expressions on their faces. But here's what none of you knew, I said. I've been recording everything. Every conversation, every meeting, every phone call. I've got evidence of fraud, conspiracy, and about 6 other felonies. That was an exaggeration, but they didn't know that. More importantly, I continued, I've been sharing that evidence with some very interested parties. The bank where Vanna works, for instance. Turns out they take a dim view of employees who use inside information for personal gain. Vanna's face crumpled. Marlow, please. And the state licensing board that oversees business consultants. They're very curious about Cleo's billing practices. You can't do this, Cleo said, standing up. You're bluffing. Am I? I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. We're live streaming right now, Cleo. Everything you've said, everything you've admitted to, it's all being broadcast to about 100 of Ashwood's most influential people. She lunged for the phone, but I was ready for her. I'd been training at Marty's gym for weeks, getting back into fighting shape. I caught her wrist and twisted, not hard enough to hurt her, but firmly enough to make my point. Sit down, Cleo. She sat. Now, I said, let's talk about what's going to happen next. I laid out the terms. Vanna would resign from the bank and leave town. Rhett would sign over his truck, his tools, and what little money he had left as partial compensation for the damage he'd caused. Cleo would dissolve her consulting business and never set foot in Ashwood again. And if we refuse? Vanna asked. Then I release everything to the authorities. Bank fraud, conspiracy, theft, adultery, it all becomes public record. Your reputations will be destroyed, you'll probably face criminal charges, and you'll spend the next few years dealing with lawyers and court dates. You're enjoying this, Rhett said bitterly. You're right, I am enjoying this. For 3 years, you people have been playing games with my life, stealing my money, planning my destruction. You thought I was too stupid and too weak to fight back. You were wrong. I stood up and walked to the door. You have 24 hours to decide. After that, the offer expires and I go straight to the police. I left them sitting there in the warehouse, probably trying to figure out how their perfect plan had turned into a perfect disaster. The live stream had captured everything, and by morning, the whole town would know the truth about Vanna, Rhett, and Cleo's conspiracy. But I wasn't done yet. There was still one more piece of business to take care of. Sunday morning, I woke up in my motel room to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Word about the warehouse confrontation had spread through Ashwood like wildfire, and suddenly everyone wanted to hear my side of the story. The local newspaper wanted an interview. The bank president wanted to assure me that they were conducting a thorough investigation of Vanna's activities. Even the mayor called to express his support and ask if there was anything the city could do to help. It was amazing how quickly public opinion could shift when people learned the truth. But the call I'd been waiting for came at noon. Darla, her voice shaky with emotion. Dad, they're packing. Mom and Uncle Rhett are throwing everything into suitcases and boxes. I think they're going to run. Where's Cleo? Gone. Left about an hour ago with 2 suitcases and her laptop. Didn't say goodbye or anything. That was expected. Cleo was smart enough to know that staying in town would only make things worse for her. By now, she was probably halfway to wherever people like her go when their schemes fall apart. What about your mother? She's been crying all morning. Keeps saying she's sorry, that she never meant for things to go this far. Uncle Rhett's just angry. He keeps talking about how you set them up, how you're not the man he thought he knew. And what do you think? There was a long pause. I think you did what you had to do. I think they pushed you too far and never considered that you might push back. Are you okay with how this turned out? I'm proud of you, Dad. I'm proud that you didn't just roll over and let them destroy you. That meant more to me than all the calls from newspaper reporters and city officials combined. Darla, I need you to do one more thing for me. What is it? I need you to get your mother on the phone. Tell her I want to talk to her privately, one last time. An hour later, Vanna called me. Her voice was hoarse, probably from crying. Marlow, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry about everything. Are you sorry about the affair, or sorry about getting caught? Both. I know you won't believe me, but I never wanted to hurt you like this. But you did hurt me. For 3 years you lied to my face, took my money, and planned my destruction. You turned my own daughter against me and convinced half the town that I was a neglectful husband who deserved what was happening to him. I know, and I hate myself for it. Do you love him? Rhett? Another long pause. I thought I did, but I think I was in love with the idea of a different life. A life where I was more important, more successful, more respected. And I was holding you back from that life? No. Yes. I don't know anymore. Cleo made it sound so simple, so justified. She said men like you would never understand women like me, that we deserved better than small-town mediocrity. Men like me. There was that phrase again. What did she promise you, Vanna? Financial stability, recognition, and an opportunity to be someone notable, rather than simply the spouse of a small business owner in a struggling town. And now? Now I've lost everything. My job, my reputation, my family. Even Rhett looks at me differently now that he knows how this all started. I felt a flicker of something that might have been sympathy, but I pushed it down. She'd made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. Where will you go? I don't know. Rhett has a cousin in Florida who might let us stay with him until we figure things out. But Marlow, what about Darla? What about her college tuition? Darla's tuition will be paid. She's my daughter, and I take care of my responsibilities. Thank you. Don't thank me. I'm not doing it for you. There was silence on the line for a long moment. Marlow, do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me? I considered the question seriously. 3 years of lies, betrayal, and systematic destruction of everything I'd built. 3 years of being made to feel like a failure as a husband, while my wife and brother laughed at me behind my back. Ask me in 10 years, I said, and hung up. That evening, I drove by the house, my house, one last time before Vanna and Rhett left town. Their cars were packed with suitcases and boxes, and they were loading the last few items. Neighbors stood in their yards, watching the drama unfold. I didn't stop. There was nothing left to say, and I had no interest in providing more entertainment for the neighborhood gossips. Instead, I drove to the Ashwood Boxing and Social Club, where Marty was waiting with a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. So, he said, pouring the drinks. How does it feel to win? I thought about that question. How did it feel to systematically destroy the people who'd tried to destroy me? How did it feel to watch my wife of 20 years pack her belongings and leave town in disgrace? Empty, I said finally. It feels empty. That's normal. Revenge is like a sugar rush. Feels great while it's happening, but it doesn't last. Any regrets? About what I did? No. About what led to it? Every day. Marty nodded. The question now is what you do next. I rebuild. The garage, my relationship with Darla, my life. I figure out how to be happy without needing to hurt anyone else. Think you can do it? I have to. The alternative is becoming the kind of person who destroys people for entertainment. We drank in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the gym, the rhythmic pounding of heavy bags, the squeak of jump ropes, the grunts and gasps of people pushing themselves to be better. Marty, I said eventually, do you think I'm a good man? I think you're a man who was pushed too far and pushed back harder. Whether that makes you good or bad depends on what you do with the rest of your life. And if I spend the rest of my life trying to make up for what I did, then maybe you'll die a better man than you lived. That night, I moved out of the motel and back into my house. It felt strange being there alone, walking through rooms that had been stripped of most of their personality. Vanna had taken the expensive furniture, the art, most of the decorative items that had made the place feel like a home. But she'd left the important things. The photos of Darla growing up, my boxing trophies, the vintage tools I'd inherited from my father. The things that actually mattered were still there, waiting for me to build a new life around them. I found a note on the kitchen counter, written in Vanna's careful handwriting. Marlow, I know this doesn't fix anything, but I wanted you to know that the best years of my life were the early ones, when we were young and everything seemed possible. I'm sorry I forgot that. I'm sorry I forgot who you really are. Take care of Darla. Take care of yourself. V. I read the note twice, then folded it and put it in a drawer. Maybe someday I'd want to remember that she'd written it. Maybe someday it would matter. But not today. Today, I had a life to rebuild and a daughter to reconnect with. I had a business to run and a reputation to restore. I had amends to make and bridges to rebuild. I had work to do. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Darla. Dad, I was wondering, would it be okay if I came home for a while? I know I said some terrible things and I know I hurt you, but come home, sweetheart. We'll figure it out together. I love you, Dad. I love you too. After I hung up, I walked through the house one more time, turning on lights in every room. Tomorrow, I'd start the process of making it feel like home again. I'd buy new furniture, hang new pictures, create new memories to replace the ones that had been poisoned by betrayal. But tonight, I just wanted to sit in my own kitchen, in my own house, and remember what it felt like to win. Even if winning felt a lot like losing, it was still better than being destroyed by people who thought I was too weak to fight back. They'd been wrong about that. They'd been wrong about everything.